Welcome to Front Office Pros. Today we're going to be talking about Dynasty running back rankings with tiers. We just recently did quarterbacks and wide receivers. For this running back group, we'll be going through 32 running backs, but we won't be including rookies. Reason being is because we believe that landing spot and draft capital will matter greatly. Before we get started, we are a new channel, so if you like this content, we ask you to smash that like button so others can find this video as well. Joe, let's get to it.
Hike!
All right, so we've got 10 tiers. Here are some 10 notable players that did not make the cut. So you got James Conner, Jamal Williams, Leonard Fournette, Jeff Wilson, Cordarrelle Patterson, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Rashad Penny, Kenneth Gainwell, Damian Harris, and Alexander Madison. So starting off with my first running back 32, in tier 10 will be Isaiah Pacheco. Pacheco, the former 7th-round pick, became the starter in Kansas City, really after Clyde Edwards-Helaire dealt with some injuries. Never really was able to retain his old role, and Pacheco really took over with a combination of him and McKinnon. Jerick McKinnon is now gone, but for me, the reason why I have him in this tier is it's low draft capital, so the Chiefs, might even draft a running back this year. This running back class is really deep. And the other thing is he was primarily used in the run game, not in the pass game. McKinnon was involved in the pass game. So I'm not convinced that Pacheco is going to continue to have a big role in this offense. And he's 24 years old, so he's a little bit older as far as a rookie, previous rookie running back. So that's why I have him there. Then I got the two Washington Commanders running backs next. So I've got Brian Robinson and Antonio Gibson. Interestingly enough, they're both 24 years old. Gibson, more of the pass catcher. Brian Robinson, more of the early down carry running back. I think that these guys are usually split time pretty well. It'll be interesting to see what happens with the new offensive coordinator, Eric Bieniemy. Do we see more involvement of Antonio Gibson, just knowing what the Chiefs have done, with guys like Jerick McKinnon and even Clyde Edwards-Helaire when he was used more frequently. But neither of these guys really interest me that much, and their volume is pretty hampered because both of them are there. Then after that, I've got Tyler Algier. I'm not the biggest Tyler Algier fan, and depending on what they do in the draft, I could really see them drafting a running back. He split time with Cordarrelle Patterson. But, he did have some flashes. He did break off some big runs. He's only 23 years old. So I think he is worth having in this tiered rankings group. And then lastly, I've got A.J. Dillon. A.J. Dillon, the hype train was real last year. I mean, you had people talking about him really taking the next step. He didn't. He faltered quite considerably. He's 25 years old. I'd like him a lot better if Aaron Jones didn't come back. But now that Aaron Jones is there, they're going to split time again. And so by the time that he could even have the full-time role, he's basically going to be his rookie contract's going to be over, and he's going to be looking for a new job. So I'm not all that excited about this group, but that's who I've got for tier 10.
Yeah, at first I thought, Pacheco might not belong, but after hearing your explanation, I think it's a fair point. I think he fits in the group with the low draft capital. It's going to be interesting to see what the Chiefs do regarding Clyde Edwards-Helaire, if he's going to still be around, if they move him, or like you mentioned too. I think they really like Isaiah Pacheco, but Kansas City's style is not just to have one guy handle the workload. So it would make a ton of sense if they also had somebody in the draft, and that's where you mentioned the two Commander running backs now. Bieniemy's kind of coming over for that system. It'll be interesting to see how he utilizes the backs because, we've seen with the Chiefs, they like to use, even 2 or 3 backs, and kind of they all have their own specialized roles and they all get opportunities. So I'm curious to see, how that affects Gibson and Robinson. And I agree with you. I'm not the biggest Algier fan either. He showed some flashes, but, with Cordarrelle Patterson there, we'll see what the Falcons want to do. They continue to add to their defense, but really haven't done much to, improve the offense. So we'll see what they do in the draft.
So heading over to tier 9, this group I think is one of the most interesting groups because these players are in positions where if running backs aren't drafted for their specific teams in the NFL draft, then I think these guys could move up a couple tiers. But because we just don't know what's going to happen after the draft, these rankings and tiers are going to change drastically. So the first guy I got is Khalil Herbert. A lot of people really, really, really are high on Herbert. And I think the main reason why is Dave Montgomery is gone. So now the volume opportunity is now his. Obviously, they have Deonta Foreman, but it was a pretty cheap deal. I don't really know how much Foreman will really be used. He really was an afterthought, and then he had a resurgence in Carolina. So just don't know what to expect from him. So I'm a little down on Herbert compared to others. I think people would have him higher, but I expect the Bears to draft a running back. I just would be really surprised if Herbert is the number one guy there. If they don't, then I might change this list. But for now, that's where I have him. Then I got Cam Akers. Cam Akers is an interesting one. He's going to be, he's 23, going to be 24 here in a few months. And he's had a really tumultuous career with the Rams. At one point was doing really well, then completely fell out of favor, and then all of a sudden came back around. So I don't really know what to expect from him. I probably would like him if he was on another team because I just don't know what to expect with the Rams. So for me, that's why I have him here. Then I got James Cook. He's 23, probably going to be 24 at the beginning of the season. I really like Cook. I think he's got a lot of great potential. He now has the opportunity to be the primary running back in Buffalo now that Devin Singletary left and now is with Houston. They did sign Damian Harris for a pretty cheap deal. Don't know how much he'll be utilized, but because he's in Buffalo, his opportunities are going to be diminished because of Josh Allen. Josh Allen, takes a lot of carries and is sort of a touchdown vulture if you think about it that way. So for me, Cook's value is going to really have to come in the passing game, and he's a very good receiver. He can create separation. So it's possible that they will try to involve him more. But there's a lot of volume to be given in that offense. So that's why I have him there for now. And lastly, I've got Rachaad White. Now, others are going to be really high on Rachaad White because Leonard Fournette is no longer there. All they have now is Chase Edmonds and Keshawn Vaughn, which I don't consider them really any contention. You heard some conversation surrounding, I think it was Bowles who might have said, or it might have been the GM, but they said that they believe Rachaad White can be a 3-down back. He's a great receiver out of the backfield. I just question if he can really be a 3-down back. I think they'll draft a running back. I think this is a smokescreen. I wouldn't even be surprised if Bijan Robinson was there when they picked that they may even take him. So I'll believe it when I see it. But if they don't draft a running back, then they're putting their money where their mouth is, and they're saying he could be a 3-down back. So for at least this season, I think he could be really good.
Yeah, I agree with your tier here. Value saying it's interesting because based on depending on what these teams do in the draft, with the Bucks and Bears especially, if they don't end up adding backs to their team, Rachaad White and the Khalil Herberts of the world become really interesting for this upcoming season.
So going over to tier 8, this is definitely my veteran group, but there's two guys I'm more concerned about than the other two. So the first guy I got on the far right is Joe Mixon. With Joe Mixon, I'm very concerned about him with all the legal issues that have been arising. He's got that arrangement or court case or whatever, I believe in April, surrounding, some type of, endangerment with threatening while holding a gun. He's going to be 27 years old when the season starts. Anytime a running back gets around that 27-year mark, they start to decline. By 28, they might as well have hit the cliff. So for me, you're already starting to see guys like Ezekiel Elliott, Leonard Fournette, these older running backs are now getting turned over. So with all the problems with Mixon, and we've already been hearing some varying reports out of Cincinnati that they're not really even committed to him. They seem very non-committal. I could very much see that they just cut Joe Mixon. And if they cut Joe Mixon, I don't know if anyone's going to sign him. We remember even when he came into the draft, he had that incident where he basically, knocked a woman out, when he punched her, in some area, and he, ended up falling to the second round. So this guy, I don't know if people will want to bring him into their locker room. So if he gets cut, I'm very concerned that his career might be over. Next, I got Alvin Kamara. Similar situation as Mixon, but not as severe. Obviously, he's got that battery charge that he's got to go to for Las Vegas. We'll see what happens there. I think he could get suspended. But he really took a step back last season. I don't know if that's because Sean Payton wasn't there anymore, but he's going to be 28 years old. Like I said, getting around that 27, 28-year-old, you're starting to get closer to off the cliff. Now, he is a different type of running back because, he's a receiver out of the backfield. So he could always end up being kind of a third down back and still end up being relevant. But I'm very concerned about him, especially with Jamal Williams being there now. And then after that happens, with everything happening to him, if he's no longer on the team with the Saints, is someone going to pick him up? I don't know. I'm not positive that they would. So both of those guys I'm very concerned about. I really didn't know where to put them. But, they have a pretty good pedigree over these past few years. So I feel like I had to keep them here. Then I got Aaron Jones. It goes against my philosophy because Aaron Jones is definitely getting older. He's, 28 years old. And, he's probably got one more year left with the Packers. Now that Aaron Rodgers is there, how much is Jordan Love? Well, Aaron Rodgers isn't there, but I'm assuming he won't be there. And so when it comes to Jordan Love, how much is Aaron Jones going to be utilized? And then after this year, I think he might be done. I don't know if anyone's going to sign him at that point. And then you've got Dalvin Cook as my last guy in tier 8. You've already heard rumors. Just even recently, we heard the GM of Minnesota saying that it's not a guarantee that Dalvin Cook is going to be on the roster. He's going to be 28 years old when the season starts. Again, we're at that scary part of the age group. I think he probably gets picked up, but I'm not even positive about that. I still think he's got some juice left. But all these guys, kind of concern me, but they've been really good. We'll just have to see how much they have left in the tank.
Yeah. What is this nonsense you're speaking here? These guys won't get picked up if they get released. Somebody will take a shot on these guys. You don't think if Kamara gets cut, the Sean Payton won't get on the phone with his agent and figure out a way to get him to Denver? And if Mixon gets released, like you said, he's going to start the season at 27. He's not 27 yet. These other guys are even 28. Somebody is going to sign Joe Mixon. This stuff with I'm not as concerned with this legal stuff. I don't know. I don't think it's really impacted him that heavily, but to your point, Mixon definitely did not look quite the same last year, but the Bengals didn't really give him the volume I think he needed either. So, I think with Mixon, I don't know. I'm a little higher on Mixon than you are, and if the Bengals are done with him, like as they've mentioned, I think somebody else will pick him up, but he's going to be less desirable because then he'll be more in in the other backfield with other crowded rooms and have less opportunities than he would with the Bengals as he's the, leader of the backfield there.
Yeah, see, I'm most concerned about Mixon. That's the guy that I'm most concerned this year. I don't agree with you. I think that if he gets released, depending on all the stuff that's going on with him, I'm not sure that he gets a job. This draft class is deep. It's one of the deepest classes in running backs we've seen in quite some time. I think it's as deep as probably that 2019 draft where you saw a guy where that was the Christian McCaffrey, Leonard Fournette, Aaron Jones, Alvin Kamara, Dalvin Cook. I mean, that draft Mixon, that draft class was loaded. We're talking about there's a really, really deep class. So I'm not so sure. Maybe even a different running back class, maybe be a different story, but I think it's a pretty rich class. So that's why I'm not so sure.
Well, I get that it's a deep class, but not everyone's gonna be able, get a piece of that. And these are rookie running backs we're talking about. I think teams will still want some sort of a veteran guy in there or a training camp back and then you bring them in, and these veterans are able to kind of show the rookies the ropes, and you just hang them on. We see veteran backs get added throughout the season every year. And, if any of these guys in this tier were to get caught, they'd be added somewhere and at least be kept on a practice squad if they didn't make a roster.
So heading over to my tier 7 group, I got 2 players in this tier, and I'm really high on these guys. I think that both of them went to good spots, and I think they really recaptured their value. I think they were pretty low, but the first guy I got is Miles Sanders. You know, for me, he's 26 years old, so he's a little bit older. So I think he's got another maybe 2 years left. But he has the Carolina backfield, I think, on lock. Has that relationship with Deuce Staley. When he was drafted with the Eagles, and so for me, I think he might be able to be a threat in the receiving game and the rushing game. He really was primarily a runner. He didn't get a lot of targets this past season. But they're going to have to rely on the running game, especially if they end up starting a rookie quarterback. So I actually really like this spot for Miles Sanders in Carolina. I actually wasn't a fan of his prior, but I think what he was able to do last year and now going into a really great landing spot, really excited to see what's going to happen for him. And the next guy I got is David Montgomery. When people first heard about him going to Detroit, I think some kind of were disappointed, because, DeAndre Swift was there. But we saw the value that Jamal Williams brought to that offense. Now, David Montgomery is not the same running back as Jamal Williams. In fact, he's more of an all-purpose back, whereas Jamal Williams was primarily just that, grinder, just that power back to get those touchdowns in the red zone. So I think that David Montgomery has a really good opportunity to, I think, take over that backfield. I'm really concerned about DeAndre Swift, and Montgomery. He'll be 26 years old this season, so I think he still has some juice left, and I'm excited to see what he's going to do in Detroit.
Yeah, it's interesting. You say that you like Miles Sanders and couldn't have gone to a better spot in Carolina and like him there, but yet you put him in this tier 7. And I know you've got some other guys in the next tier, in tier 6, that you'll discuss. And I know you'll potentially like Sanders better. So I'm curious as to why you have him in tier 7. I think he should be, potentially higher. I get that he's 26 years old, but doesn't have the mileage that a typical 26-year-old running back might have, because he was in a, Philly always had that shared split backfield situation. So never really got a full workload of carries, as he's more of a home run hitter type player.
Yeah, no, I think it's a good point. And honestly, I really strongly considered flip-flopping this tier 7 and tier 6 to what I'm about to do, but I'll explain why I didn't.
I think I'd like that better.
Wow, yeah, you might. I think you agree with me.
There's only one guy in the tier that I'm a little more interested in, potentially having a rebound season here that might not fit that bill. But
so this much discussed tier 6 includes, on the far right, our first guy in tier 6 is running back Dameon Pierce. He was, really did a great job last year for the Houston Texans. 23 years old. I think my biggest concern with him, I like Pierce, I really do, but I just don't know. I don't know what to expect going into this next season. We knew Lovie Smith wanted to run the ball. He made that clear. So when they drafted Dameon Pierce, they had really nobody in that offense, besides Rex Burkhead. To me, I was like, okay, this is like Houston was the best landing spot for a running back last offseason, and Pierce took advantage of it. Now we've got a new head coach with D'Amico Ryans. He's still the same GM with Nick Caserio, but they've already brought in Devin Singletary, which I know you're going to tell me Devin Singletary, I'm not scared about him. But, I saw what he did in Buffalo. He is able to, carry a decent amount of carries. So to me, I think he is going to work into, take away from the workload from Dameon Pierce. Not enough where I'm avoiding Dameon Pierce. But for me, I think it's a concern. Then the next two guys are probably the two guys I'm most out on. But I felt like I had to keep them there because of their age. When it comes to running back, age is huge. When it comes to running back, when these guys start to get older, they really fall off the cliff. In their rookie years, rookie contract years, it's really imperative to capitalize on that value. So that's why I felt like I had to have them in tier 6, because these guys are 2 years younger than guys like Montgomery and Sanders. So the first guy I got is J.K. Dobbins. Guy can't stay healthy. It seems like a lot of people like J.K. Dobbins. But for me, when it comes to Dobbins, he's with Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson takes so many opportunities away from me. He doesn't really have that backfield on lock. He's got to share it really with Lamar Jackson. So with his injuries and his offense, I'm just not a big fan. And then DeAndre Swift's probably the guy who I think is probably one of the more polarizing players. And for me, I've been out on Swift now ever since really last season. But now that Montgomery is there, I'm even more out on him. The guy can't stay healthy. We've heard, comments, from his head coach, Dan Campbell, talking about trying to, kind of seem frustrated, trying to figure out a different regiment for him, whether it's practice schedule or working out, nutrition, whatever, to get this guy to be able to be on the field. Hasn't been able to stay on the field. I think that they have every intention of moving away from Swift. He'll be a free agent next year. I think, they're phasing him out of that offense. I think he's a dynamic player, and I get why people like him. I've seen him when he's healthy and he's being used properly. The guy is a dynamic running back. I don't discount that. But, he's also short. A lot of these running backs, 5'9" and below, scare me because they don't get enough volume. They can't, really consistently get over 200 carries. So to me, I understand why people like him based on the potential, but I'm now off that train because I can't. At some point, there's a diminishing return where I like his potential, but then eventually it's like, well, if you're not going to be on the field, I can't enjoy your potential any longer.
Yeah, I think the guy I'm most out on in your list is DeAndre Swift. I didn't really like him last year myself either. I agree with you. David Montgomery definitely complicates things, and I like him even less since he is there. But I like J.K. Dobbins though. I think he'll potentially come back and rebound. You saw it at the end of the year. Once he was fully healthy, off the major knee surgery that he had. He had some of those runs. Now at first he didn't have the burst or the stamina to sustain him and get him for touchdowns, but he looked really good to me at the end of the season, so I'm encouraged by him. And Pierce is a guy I really like, and I really liked him last year, but with the addition of Singletary and possibly they could add a running back in the draft as well. Just that he's not the only guy there anymore, and his workload is going to get cut. So I'm definitely not as in love with Pierce this year.
So transitioning over to tier 5, I've got two players who I think a lot of people in the dynasty industry and fantasy football in general are really high on these guys. I think they're expecting them to really take that next step. But I still think that there are some, I'll call it concerns or red flags. It's not really red flags, maybe more yellow flags that I don't know if they'll reach their potential. So going over to tier 5, the first guy I got is Tony Pollard. People are really, really, really high on Tony Pollard. And I understand he had a dynamic season last year, even with sharing, the carries with Ezekiel Elliott. Ezekiel Elliott's no longer there. So now, he's going to be the guy and he's going to take over that backfield. I'm not buying it. He, broke his leg or tibia, fibula, whatever it was. So he's got to recover from that. He's 26 years old. So we're talking, in my mind, he's got about 2 years left, 1.5, 2 years left of great value. Now, you could argue that he wasn't used as much. There's not as much tread on those tires, so to speak. So you could argue that he could play later. But I think Dallas is primed to get a running back. If it's me, I think Jerry is targeting Bijan, keeping him in the state of Texas. I think Pollard can't handle the workload entirely. I don't think he's a guy that can get over 200 plus carries, every game. I know people want that from him. I just don't see it. And then you got Ramondre Stevenson. I don't know what to do with Ramondre Stevenson. He's 25 years old. Damian Harris is no longer there. He basically left him in the dust last season, and now it's his backfield. I know they brought in James Robinson, but I'm not concerned about that. But when it comes to Ramondre, I heard some rumors, and this is the thing I'm concerned because it's New England backfield, that the New England Patriots have been pretty much extensively looking into the running back class this year. And that's the thing with the Patriots. They rarely ever dedicate the rock to one guy. They usually have a multitude of guys that they end up using. And that's part of the reason why I traded him last year, although I kind of regret it, was because I wasn't convinced that Belichick is going to change his philosophy and he's just going to be the guy. So we'll have to see what happens in the draft. But if it's true what they're saying, that another running back, they're looking at running backs and they're planning on drafting a running back, now we're talking about that being a possible nightmare situation.
Yeah, the Patriots backfield is always a nightmare situation, and that's why I always tend to avoid it. As you mentioned, I heard rumors this morning that the Patriots could possibly be taking Bijan Robinson. They're one of the teams for him to land in the draft here, so it's going to be interesting to monitor that. But at some point, the Patriots seem to always take a running back somewhere in the draft and add somebody. So, I think this is a fair spot for Ramondre. It's kind of sucks because I like his talent and wish he played for a different team that might just dedicate more workload to him because, although I guess you can make the same question, can he really handle it? I mean, he's a guy who's kind of battled these soft tissue injuries and stuff like that, when he has gotten a bulk of the workload. But, yeah, I agree with you. Like with the Patriots, I'm not as high on Stevenson myself. And then, it's interesting. I think even if Pollard, you're right. He's not built to be the workload and the 200 carry guy. But I think even if the, Cowboys were to draft Bijan Robinson, there's a spot in a role for him. And I'm still excited because he's just such a dynamic player and makes those big plays, and that's pretty valuable for fantasy.
So would you have Tony Pollard in tier 5, or you think he deserves to be in a higher tier?
I think where you have him is fine. Especially since, like you said, he probably does only have a couple of years left, and he might not have as long. But I guess you could make that case for the guys that are coming in the next one. He's interesting. I think it's a fair spot, but I could make an argument that he should be one spot higher with these guys in tier 4.
So heading over to tier 4, this is really my veteran running back group that I think still have, some juice left, and they've been dynamic over these past few years, but it's getting to the point where they no longer will be relevant. So first off, we got Derrick Henry. Derrick Henry, I believe, is an anomaly. There are not a lot of running backs that are built like him. Just his mammoth size, his vicious running style. You do not see running backs of his profile come out. Honestly, I can't even really remember a running back like him as far as I've been following it, over the past 10, 15 years, the type of bruising, acceleration style that he has. So usually I would say, hey, he's pretty old. And last year, I was wrong. I was telling people to try to sell him after the first few weeks because I thought he was going to hit the cliff. It'll be interesting. If he gets traded, that could change, a lot because there have been rumors that he might get traded. But Vrabel loves his style, and it has really made the identity of the Tennessee Titans offense surrounding around him. So will that continue or will it not? And do they end up drafting somebody? It's always hard to, when it comes to Dynasty, it's always hard to try to understand the value of older players. I know a lot of people may not like what I have here in tier 4 with Henry, but he's going to give you immediate production at least this year and maybe the next. And when it comes to these younger running backs, I understand that they have a longer shelf life, but if they never get to the point where they perform at a high level, then yeah, it's great they have this youth on their side, but they're not going to produce for you to make it relevant. So it's always hard. It's a hard thing to really quantify the value for these guys. Next guy I got is Nick Chubb. He's 27 years old. I actually was surprised, how old he was. And now with Kareem Hunt no longer there, I actually might be kind of convinced that they may bring in a running back in the draft. We'll find out if they do or not. But, Chubb's a guy that I think is pretty underrated. I have many times looked over him because I thought that he, wasn't going to – he had him and Kareem Hunt, and I was, very concerned about it. But he's been able to perform year in and year out. He's just a consistent guy. I do think that Browns offense is starting to change its identity. It's going to be more, the vocal point's going to be more with Deshaun Watson and passing. So that does concern me, and he's older. But I felt like he belonged in this tier. And then the last one I got in this tier is Austin Eckler. He's going to be 28 years old at the start of the season. He's got 1 year left with the Chargers. And obviously, we've been hearing a lot about it because he wants a new deal, which is no surprise because running backs at this age, like we've been talking about, 27, 28, they're starting to fall off the cliff. Now, he's a different type of running back, undrafted. So what he's been able to do is quite impressive. But he's a prolific receiver. So I do think that he's the type of guy that could stay relevant longer because he could always be a third down back for just that aspect for later in his career. But so many questions surrounding him. I definitely think he's not going to be back with the Chargers after this year. And who knows who's going to want him at that point.
Yeah, this is an interesting tier because, like you said, it's a lot of, older running backs, but they're still really accomplished and still performing. I think as far as Derrick Henry goes, I actually wonder if it'd be better if they did, Titans didn't end up trading him somewhere. I get with Vrabel and, loves to run the ball, but and all the opportunities that Derrick Henry would get there. But the offensive line is now, they've made a lot of moves along it. It's gotten potentially worse. I just wonder if he'd be better off in another spot with a better offensive line. Maybe they don't dedicate so much to the run, but, that might help as far as him having a couple of years left as well. And, you mentioned Nick Chubb. I just feel like he gets overlooked because he is so consistent, doesn't really do anything flashy. He's just a really solid and consistent running back, to have on your team. And I think the fact that he doesn't catch the ball actually helps him because Deshaun Watson doesn't really dump the ball down. And I think that's where, for them having a catching back like Kareem Hunt doesn't really make a lot of sense because Watson has never been a really guy to check it down to a running back. He uses his athletic ability to make plays and get throws down the field or just runs himself. So it will be interesting to see how Chubb gets utilized this year and the potential change in offense. As far as Eckler goes, I do agree with you if with his playing style, if he is with Chargers just this 1 year, I think he does provide value to some team as a third down back, kind of play that James White role that we've seen, with the Patriots, and then he's gone on other teams and still played that third down role as well.
So transitioning over to tier 3, I'll get some interesting comments probably for those who watch this video. So the first guy I got is Javonte Williams. Now, I understand he had that gruesome knee injury that is going to affect him, and he may not even see the field next year. I know, Joe, as a Broncos fan, you probably preferred if that was the case to make sure that he was entirely healthy. But Javonte Williams is only 23 years old. So to me, he's as far as an age factor, I really like that. And from what we've seen from Javonte, he's a really talented running back. It'll be really interesting to see what Sean Payton does, with that offense. I know that they brought in some P. Ryan, but P. Ryan's just a 1 year guy. He's a 1 year rental that is a serviceable running back. But I'm excited to see what he can do. You had Sean Payton, during his time in New Orleans. Obviously, he did really great things, with Alvin Kamara, but also had the likes of Pierre Thomas, Mark Ingram, maybe more kind of those more power type style running back. So I think Javonte is going to be used, quite extensively. I think even though Peyton, wasn't there when they drafted him, I think he's definitely in Denver's plan. So I think just based on the pure talent and the age, like you could make the argument for other guys I've put lower that they should, be there instead of Javonte. But to me, I just subjectively, I believe that, he's better in those categories as far as potential and his age and his opportunity too. I don't think that I mean, again, P Ryan's a Band-Aid, situation. They don't really have any. Melvin Gordon was there before, and that was the problem. Melvin Gordon being a little bit younger, but now with Melvin Gordon no longer there, he doesn't have a Batman and Robin situation. I think once he gets healthy, could be a great opportunity for him. Then I got Josh Jacobs. He's 25 years old. I've been a big Jacobs fan, and it just so happens the year where I was like, you know what, I think I'm done. He played, McDaniels played him in the Hall of Fame game. They drafted Zamir White, and then what do you know? He ends up being the league's leading rusher this past season. It's just unbelievable. But with him, I actually really like his talent, but my concern with him is I wonder if we've seen the best of him. And I don't like what's going on with him in Vegas. I know he got the franchise tag, but I would have liked to seen him be able to possibly become a free agent, be able to go where he would have liked to have went. I just don't really know. I could really see the Raiders kind of using him this year, him not having as a good year, and then getting rid of him and just discarding him. So I have some concerns about that for him. And then my last guy in this tier is Saquon Barkley. Barkley is a dynamic player as long as he stays healthy. A lot of people obviously were way down on him because of all those injuries, and rightfully so. Now Brian Dable comes in. It just goes to show when you've got an offensive mastermind as a coach, it can really change things. Before when he was dealing with Ben McAdoo, and I'm trying to think of the other guy's name. I can't think of it at the time, but. I really think him and Brian Dable, it's a good combination. We'll see. Right now, he's potentially threatening to hold out because he wants a new contract. I think he'll end up playing, but he is 26 years old, so he's a little bit older. So that's why I have him at tier 3. Just don't think he belongs in that tier 2 because, he is still injury prone. So, he could still get injured next season and beyond.
Yeah, this is a pretty interesting tier of guys as well, guys that are interesting, like you mentioned. I do have my fingers crossed that the Broncos don't use Javonte Williams this year unless he's fully healthy. I just don't want them to rush him back, make the same mistake that Baltimore did last year with J.K. Dobbins trying to bring him back too soon. Then he ended up having to go, back on the IR and then, came back at the end of the season. So, but there's no doubt that he's got a ton of talent. And, if he is fully healthy, I'd love to see what Sean Payton's going to do with him on the field. Josh Jacobs, he's interesting. I was also disappointed he got the franchise tag. Would have liked to see him gone to a different team. But I think, at least for this year with Vegas, I think while he probably won't repeat what he did last year just because he was so great, I still think he'll have a pretty good year in Vegas. Not much as, the offense has got some different pieces, a different quarterback, but I think their run game could still be relatively the same, especially with him there. As long as he stays healthy, I'm still expecting good things from him. And yeah, Barkley, I agree with you. I don't think he's going to hold out for the whole season. I know he's threatening that, but we've seen Le'Veon Bell do that. He's really been the one guy, especially at the running back position, to do that, and it didn't really benefit him. So at the end of the day, I think Barkley will come and play, and then hopefully the Giants don't franchise him again next year.
So transitioning over to my tier 2, this is definitely two of these guys I think I'm definitely more high on than the consensus. The first guy is Najee Harris. I'm a big Najee Harris fan. I think he gets way too much. People are way too down on him, in my opinion. He was injured last year. Offensive line was an absolute shambles. And I know he's an older running back as far as when he came into the league as a rookie. He's 25 years old. So that's actually, he's the same. You think about it, he's the same age as Josh Jacobs. But when it comes down to it, I think there are very few teams that really say, hey, you're the bell cow in our offense, or you're the guy that we're going to give the primarily workload to. And I feel like that is Najee Harris for the Steelers. I know there was a whole hubbub about, Jaylen Warren might get involved and all this other stuff. But Jaylen Warren is a role player who possibly gets involved. Let's see what things look like with Najee Harris now going into year 3. a better offensive line. They signed some offensive linemen to improve that offensive line. Kenny Pickett's going to be going into year 2 in that offense, going to have way more comfortability. We already saw near the end of the year, we started to see kind of flashes of the old Najee Harris as far as his rookie year. So I'm excited. I think Najee could have a really good season this year and really bounce back. Then I got Travis Etienne. Etienne's 24 years old. I wish that the Jaguars would have utilized him more than they did after James Robinson left. They did for like a few weeks, and then all of a sudden he kind of fell off. So I do have some concerns there. And then with Dearness Johnson, now they signed him, which I think he's going to be more of a role player. But Etienne, he has that ability to kind of go to the house. And, that familiarity with Trevor Lawrence, I think, is really important. They played in college together. They've got that familiarity. They've got that comfort to know where each other needs to be at the right time. So I think for now, I have Etienne in that tier 2. We'll see what happens in the draft. Obviously, Doug Peterson wasn't there when they drafted Travis Etienne, and Peterson has been known to have kind of a bevy of running backs. So that does kind of concern me. But for now, I have him in tier 2. I like his potential and obviously his age. And then the last guy I got in tier 2, and this is a tough one for me, but it's Christian McCaffrey. Christian McCaffrey is going to be 27 years old. So again, rule of thumb would tell you that, he's getting to the point where he's going to fall off. But, I really think Christian McCaffrey is an anomaly. I think he is a generational running back for what he's been able to do. And he's in one of the most friendly, places that he could be in San Francisco with Kyle Shanahan. I had my concerns. I thought he could, be involved with a rotation of backs, but they featured him quite extensively. And I actually think that McCaffrey, even though, he is, going to be 27, I could see him playing, at least maybe a few more years. I could be wrong about saying that because, like I said, it would definitely not be the norm. But his talent when it comes to receiving, which is going to be what helps him stay longer, as well as running the ball. I really think that his longevity is longer than most older running backs.
Yeah. I mean, he's really the only guy I have an argument against here for tier 2. I think he belongs in that tier 1. There's very few running backs, and especially even in Dynasty, that I'd rather have in fantasy right now than Chris McCaffrey, even though he is older. He went over to the San Francisco 49ers offense, and man, he just really took off for his fantasy potential and his points. He's so opportunistic, and it just has an opportunity just to get so many points on the prolific offense in the 49ers. I think I'd probably have him in tier 1. But you mentioned Najee Harris. I was out on him last year, but I'm back in on Najee as long as he's healthy and that foot thing is no longer lingering or holding him back. You mentioned the improved offensive line, Kenny Pickett in year 2. I really like his potential. I think this is a good spot. And as far as your disappointment with Etienne and his workload dropping, I think that's because Jacksonville realized that he just can't handle that big of a workload. He's also a smaller running back, kind of similar to Tony Pollard in that way, a ton of explosiveness, but I don't think he's big enough to handle a 200, carry workload either. And that's why they got to have somebody else to complement him so that he stays that dynamic guy and gets you those big plays in the offense.
So it sounds like you're saying you would put Etienne down a tier.
I mean, I think him and Najee are okay in tier 2, but I think Etienne, he's an uber talented guy. I just think that the Jacksonville Jaguars just realized, man, we just as far as why his workload went down was just, man, we just can't put all this put the massive workload on him, or else he's going to wear himself down, and we need to keep him and maintain that explosiveness.
So transitioning to our last tier, our final tier, the best tier, tier number 1. The first guy I got is running back Kenneth Walker. I got to take the L on this one. I was really concerned. He's 5'9". He's right on that border for me where I'm concerned as far as his height. He didn't really show that receiving prowess in college at Michigan State. I know you would tell me all the time, that doesn't matter. He'll be able to receive the NFL. I had my doubts, but he proved me wrong. Where Rashad Penny got injured out for the year, he stepped in, and he really became that guy that everybody hoped that he would be. So for me, the biggest thing is he's 22 years old. He'll be close to 23 at the start of the season. When it comes, I think of any position group, running back is most important when it comes to age and how and being able to keep a young profile. That's why you see it in the real NFL. Why do you think they say rookie running backs are so important? Because after their rookie contract, you don't see, sometimes they don't even get a second contract, or if they do, it's very underwhelming. So in a similar case, you want to have running backs in a dynasty perspective that are young. I do have some concern with Kenneth Walker down the road, though. Like I have him in tier 1. I can't see how I can't have him in tier 1. But I don't know. Let's see 1 or 2 years from now. I don't know if he's going to have that backfield on lock. I really don't. Who knows? That 5'9" thing is starting to bother. It still bothers me. So I don't know if he'll continue to be that guy in Seattle long term.
Can I just ask, what is this 5'9" thing you keep bringing up? And is it legit? Like, why is that so concerning for you?
If you look at running backs who are 5'9" or shorter, like I said, 5'9" is a cutoff, especially 5'8" and lower. Give me examples. There are not a lot of examples of running backs who have been successful.
How tall was Maurice Jones-Drew?
Okay, everybody uses him as an example, but he's like 5'7" or 5'6", and he had a different type of build. We're not that's like the one example that somebody could use. It's not a consistent example. Okay,
well, to me, why I'm not worried about Kenneth Walker and his 5'9" is because he's got a bigger frame as well. I don't know. You kept bringing up the 5'9" threshold, and I just was trying to get why it's such a scare and what the legitimacy is.
Well, it's the height and the weight. To your point, it's not just the height. Like, this is not a rookie running back conversation, but you got a guy like Devin Achane, who I have I have strong concerns over, the running back guy at Texas A&M, because he's 5'8" and he's like 180 pounds. Like, to me, those are two knocks against you, because you're not over 200 pounds and you're in that 5'9" and below area. But that's just my own personal evaluation and how I view running backs. Some people might think I'm nuts, and they're entitled to that opinion. But that's how I view it, and that's how I strategize when it comes to drafting players and how I value players. So in my next spot, I got Jonathan Taylor, 24 years old. I mean, Taylor, other than last year, I mean, he's been a stud. We'll be interested to see what happens with that offense now that Shane Steichen is now the head coach, and how he decides what that offensive identity is for that team. But I think he should have a bounce back year. He's 24 years old. I mean, it's crazy how young he is. He's in the league longer, and he's younger than guys like ETN, or right around the age of ETN. So, but really like Jonathan Taylor. And then my best guy on tier 1, and then the number 1 running back is Breece Hall. I'm actually not the biggest. This is not like a pound the table. Like, you gotta have Breece Hall for me. To me, I was a little bit. I soured on Breece Hall heading in the draft, but I mean, he's 20. He's 22. He's going to be 22 years old. So and I thought that there would be some concern that him and Michael Carter were going to be used a lot, but for whatever reason, they just did not allow Michael Carter to get enough snaps. They felt the need to go get James Robinson, then never used him. And then, you saw Zonovan Knight get involved. So I'm not really concerned about Michael Carter anymore. And one of my bigger reasons why I didn't really like him is because they had Zach Wilson at quarterback. I thought, to me, they were just going to stack the box. So now you got possibly Aaron Rodgers going there. Breece Hall's coming off an ACL, but there's all reports are saying he's recovering well. He'll be 22 years old. It's hard not to put Breece Hall as the number 1 running back in Dynasty rankings right now.
Yeah, I agree with you. Breece Hall definitely has to be the number 1 guy at this point. He's only going to be 22 starting this season, and just the opportunity and how good the Jets offense potentially will be, with Aaron Rodgers. It's crazy to talk about the Jets offense actually being good and dynamic. It's wild, but that's what it would potentially be with Aaron Rodgers at quarterback. So I agree with you with Breece Hall, number 1 overall. But, Kenneth Walker, he was a guy I told you last year I was really high on in the draft. And you got to be careful, breaking that down, Steve. I told you just because he didn't catch the ball at Michigan State didn't mean he could catch the ball, because before he transferred there, he caught the ball. So you got to kind of be careful and wean out those things. And he was great at Michigan State and really showed out, in his rookie year in Seattle as well.
So that concludes our top 32 Dynasty running back rankings with tiers. If you enjoyed this content, we ask you to please like this video so others can find it. Comment below on your reaction to our Dynasty running backs rankings with tiers. You can also subscribe to our YouTube channel, and we recently have joined Apple and Spotify podcasts, so you can listen to us there as well. But thank you so much for watching, and until next time.